Hello, my name is Alicia Huerta, and I'm going to be speaking about eating disorders in collegiate athletes. Eating disorders are also defined as disturbance of eating habits or weight control behavior that can result in significant impairment of physical health or psychosocial functioning. Risk factors are multifactorial and can be divided into predisposing factors such as genetics, psychological traits, uh, and socio-cultural factors. Triggering factors such as comments about weight, and perpetuating factors such as approval by the coach when weight is lost. According to many research articles so far, there is no clear understanding of what increases the level of susceptibility to developing an eating disorder among collegiate athletes. Eating disorders are dangerous. They can cause lifelong damage and are often hard to identify. I am going to use various articles to help athletic trainers, coaches, teams, and parents learn the different methods that could help identify problematic eating behaviors, which increases the risk susceptibility to eating disorders. The first article is susceptibility to eating disorders among collegiate female athletes. The first article found that there was a low number of female athletes who were susceptible to an eating disorder, that most female athletes fell within normal to high range for self-esteem level and defined themselves as satisfied with their body. The second article is perceptions of eating behaviors, body image, and social pressures in female Division II college athletes and non-athletes. Uh, this this article also shared the same, most of the same. They both had reported lower perceptions of negative body image, and as well as lower levels of disordered eating among the athletes. The researchers explained that um, um, synthesis, the two articles were able to recreate the same outcome. Uh, at the end of the studies, it was found that there was a low level of susceptibility in among female athletes to develop an eating disorder, as well as normal to high self-esteem. Um, Despite the fact that these two studies resulted in similar statistics, they come to two completely different conclusions. The first article believes that it is a result of timing and participant cooperation. The second article assumes it is probably a result of athletes' high Hispanic rate. Uh, Timing the reason why the first one, okay, timing, the athletes may simply not have developed disruptive eating patterns at the time of the inquiry. And the first article also stated that it could also be that it is also important to not that those who were susceptible to eating disorders may have chosen to not participate in the study. So individuals could have had those signs and symptoms, but they chose to take themselves out of the study, so they weren't accounted for in the statistics. The second one is that the team is predominantly Hispanic, about 80%, which is, according to the article, is a cultural group that uncommonly participates in diet and exercise. The article states that Hispanics have a greater amount of fat in their central and upper bodies, and Western cultural idea of thinness has not necessarily become a cultural ideal for Hispanics, which is which is an idea for why Hispanics or at least the softball team didn't really feel bothered about their weight. The third article is personality and psychological correlates of eating disorders among male collegiate athletes. The first article, based on responses, were 80% male athletes were asymptomatic and 19% were asymptomatic. No athletes were classified as eating disordered. The results of the study suggested that personality and psychological factors found to distinguish between asymptomatic and symptomatic female athletes cannot be transferred to their male counterparts. The second article, identifying college athletes at risk for pathogenic eating. Pathogenic eating is another term for eating disorders. The second article, to help better identify those who pose a higher risk at being susceptible to eating disorders, participants were asked to complete a series of questionnaires, the DSED, or the Diagnostic Survey of Eating Disorders. The responses to the questionnaire provided important information with a respectable accuracy of 70%. Of identifying those who were susceptible to eating disorders. Evaluation. Personality and psychological correlates of eating disorder symptoms among male collegiate athletes. Despite it being wrong, it was actually really good in showing and displaying that male and female athletes do not respond the same way to certain tests. So it's good to find other methods of testing. Weaknesses that they didn't prove personality and psychological are associated with eating disorders among male collegiate athletes. Identifying collegiate athletes at risk for pathogenic eating. The strength would be the questionnaire used in the study. It was successful in identifying men with greater risk of developing an eating disorder. It was actually one of the most successful ones out of all of these articles. The weakness, though, was that the study could use a bigger population. It primarily focused on basketball players, and in order to get better representation, it should focus on other male athletes. Synthesis. According to the two studies, the second article was the most successful in finding a way to successfully identify male collegiate athletes' susceptibility and their risk for developing an eating disorder. Evaluation of the first two identification methods. Susceptibility to eating disorders among collegiate female athletes. The findings were consistent with other research. The weakness is because there is a potential that the athletes could be lying, which would mean that the data would not be entirely reliable. Unfortunately, this could mean that some athletes are never identified as high risk. Perceptions of eating behaviors, body image, and social pressures in female Division II, college athletes and non-athletes. Strength is the article represents more races than the first article. That's because they incorporate that's because the athletes studied were predominantly Hispanic and African American. The weakness, though, would be that the population sample was small, which would mean that the data is not as accurate in depicting a population percentage. Conclusion. There needs to be better methods for identifying athletes who are susceptible to developing eating disorders. So far, we need more research to be done to help actually identify a set, cause or risk factors Also, there needs to be more research among minorities. Of the Among minorities, because there isn't really very much to go off.